And hello, I'm back. How are you? Um, so I tried to make this video. I tried to make this video probably for more than a year. Like it's been in the back of my mind. I was like, I need to talk about this. I need to talk about this. And the thing is, I wander away because I have lots of roles. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a researcher, I'm a scholar, business owner. And so, it would get lost in the shuffle of things that I needed to do. And then something else would happen. And I was like, I need to write that because it would be something that could support what I wanted to say. Um, and so I finally created a space to talk about this. And as you know, that the title of this is my love letter or my letter with a care package to Black women and girls. And I recall that so many things have happened to us, specifically given our position as being both marginalized by race and by gender. And over the last 2 years, it seems to be compounded. And so I'm finally trying to make a space to talk to you, to appeal to you, to have a conversation about it. But first, let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Keisha Ducree. I am a Black Studies professor, and I am also a Black feminist geographer. I have a company called the Sojourners Academy, where the motto is to travel, learn, and transform. I take my ideas and my research and my writing about the African diaspora, about Black women, to create a decolonized curriculum for both kids and their parents and their grandparents. I curate experiences, and I write about the same subject of space and race and gender and power. So if this is your first time here, hello. If you've been with me for a little while, hello again. Thank you. I'm not very regular with recording. I'm trying to do a better job. I really am. But if you have not, please subscribe so that I can continue to talk about the ways that things that we read and that we gloss over, how they make sense in terms of Black feminist geographies. Again, so you can subscribe. I'll give you a moment right now to just hit that button for subscribe. I think if you hit it again or you hover over it, you can actually get a notification for the times that I do post something. And I would be very appreciative of it. But now let's get back to the right? And what I have here, if you can see, is some post-it notes. I have so much to say, and I want to be tight in what I say. So I have like literal post-it notes on things right around my camera. So what is she talking about? I've been talking for a couple of minutes now. And what is my point? So again, this point is my love letter to Black women, and in all the ways, the accumulation of events and harms that have happened to us since this administration. You know what I mean by that. Since this administration started and their campaign to really enact white supremacist ideology in policies and in leadership. And so, the first time I wanted to sit here and talk to you was when a few months into 2025, and we heard that 300,000, and then now that summer we heard that 500,000 Black women left the job market, which sounds really like, oh, we just took off, right? When in fact, we they were forced out of the job market. They were forced out of the job market. And so there was a certain shock to the system about that. And before we could catch our breath, we heard about the story of Adriana Smith in Georgia, who was declared brain dead. But because of the heinous Georgia abortion ban, she was kept on life support systems because she was pregnant. And what people really may not remember, or I think it's also important to stress, that Adriana was a nurse. She was a nurse. And she went to get medical attention because she's a nurse and she knew something was wrong. And she had been pregnant before. She had a son. And they sent her back home. That's a whole nother story about Black women and mortality rates of pregnant Black women. But I just want to stress that she was a health professional and she knew something was wrong. And she went to her colleagues and they sent her back home, which resulted in her needing emergency attention and being declared brain dead. But because of this abortion ban and their child, the fetus, was alive, they kept her alive for weeks against her family's wishes and prolonged her life solely for the benefit of the authors of this ban. There was no recovery for her. And they ultimately delivered her child, but only because her body was decomposing. A Black woman's body. Then there was, I don't want to speak his name, but it was maybe a month or so, 2 months ago, the Virginia Lieutenant Governor who left his office in scandal, sexual harassment scandal, and fast forward with divorcing his wife. We're in the middle of divorce proceedings. And their children came home to see that he had killed their mom, Black mother, another Black mother, and then turned the gun on himself. And if you could absorb that, if you could begin and read and absorb that, another desecration of a Black woman's body at the hands of her husband, you were doubly affected when you read the comments because of their social status and education. They were much tied to a Black middle-class neighborhood and a community. And so you would see some of his fraternity brothers in the wake of the news write these completely tone deaf responses of, man, he was a good guy and he was a this and he was a that and this is in many ways defending him and completely negating that he killed a Black mother. So the incident of itself is horrible. And then to look for a level of solidarity among particularly Black men who were commenting, there was an absence of recognizing that he took a Black woman's life. Help me understand that. And then maybe a week or two later, the Florida vice mayor, another Black woman, is killed by her husband. prominent Black women in the community, and the murder by their partners. And I think I don't I preface by saying I don't really watch tennis. I mean, like, I'll watch like the big matches, I'll, take a look at the TV to watch Wimbledon, take a look at the TV to watch the French Open. But I followed it a little bit, particularly the Black women. That's who I cheer for, rooting for everybody Black, right? And I just recalled, I can't even remember anymore because again, this has been building up in me for a while. And I think the initial and it just seems like Black women, Black tennis stars are treated horribly. I think what prompted me again back in time to talk about this ode to Black women, I think it was, I don't know her name. I'm sorry, because I don't really follow it, but she's been around for a while, a prominent player. She's not Naomi or Coco Gauff, Naomi Osaka, or Venus and Serena, but she's that caliber of a player, or very close to. And I don't know if you remember, but at the end of the match, I think her opponent was very rude and very nasty. Very rude and very nasty. And there was some blowback from that. And her opponent, European, so white woman, was like, that's not the way I meant it. English isn't my first language. This appeal to humanity about her mistake. But her mistake was speaking vile to a Black woman player who bested her and not accepting that best. And then since then, there have been others. Naomi Osaka was criticized for having a dinner with Black people. White people do that all the time. And just the regular slights that happen to Black women athletes. And then just this weekend, I was like, you know what? Okay, we're gonna credit slight. It's the smallest slight of all of these. We're talking murder, okay? But nonetheless, what kind of said I need to sit in my seat and do this is because of this weekend's UFC mess on the White House mess. And that this fool, not the main fool, we know the main fool. I ain't talking about that fool. I'm talking about the fool that won the bouts at the end. When he was giving, I guess, what would assume to be a victory speech, that he has our former first lady in his mouth and calling her a man. Michelle Obama is living her life, and she is living rent-free in his head at the moment that he should have been victorious and proud and saying, in his small brain, something about the win. Miss Michelle is all the way in Chicago planning for the presidential center library to open. Why was she in his mouth? And then he tries to he says, she is a man. And we're going to talk about this defining Black women as man in a minute. I promise you, I'm going to get scholarly on this. This is pretty emotional. But then he goes like, am I right? Like, he wants to make denigrating this Black woman minding her damn business a rallying call for what is supposed to be a celebration of that other mess's birthday and tie it to the 250th anniversary. Like, how and why does this even make sense? So it's like, it's in this cauldron, and I call it a cauldron of hatred and disrespect and abuse of Black women and our bodies, that I'm appealing today to say Dear Black women, we only have ourselves. We only have ourselves. And in that, I want to introduce in all these events, what do you call this? Because there is a name for it. And Moya Bailey gave us the name for it. And it's called Misgynoir. Misgynoir. M-I-S. Whoops. Sorry about that. I don't know how to turn my sound off. There you go. Misgynoir. Misgynoir. And so, oh my gosh, I'm at 15 minutes. And so Misgynoir, if you break it down, we're gonna get, no, this is how we're doing in class. Like we're gonna get all down to like the Greek. So M-I-S, Ms, is hatred of, control of, deep disrespect and hatred of. So you've heard of misandry or misanthrope, the hatred of something. The gyne, G-Y-N, we know is of women in, dealing with women. So we have the hatred of women. Gyne is the women. We know that from words, of course, like gynecology. And then noir is Black. So it literally translates to the hatred of Black women. The hatred of Black women, Misgynoir. And while Moya Bailey coined this term probably around 2008, we knew about Kimberly Crenshaw's and her intersectionality, right? The theory of occupying different spaces, marginalized spaces, right? And they could be any series of marginalized spaces. Her paper where she it starts it all is the paper from 1999, Mapping the Margins. And she lays out not just Black women, but how immigrant women experience the system of oppression. And so Kimberly Crenshaw is talking about this system of oppression that can be, there could be multiple oppressions given people's social location and social identity. But Bailey is talking about specific hatred and specific control and vitriol towards Black women. So Misgynoir is a practice. Intersectionality is a framework, is a theory. White supremacy is an ideology. Patriarchy is an ideology that shapes our systems, but Misgynoir is a practice. It's the act of calling a Black woman a man, negating the value of a Black woman's body, identifying with her oppressor, and allowing Black women to be ridiculed and questioned is Misgynoir. And I want to stress that while the term may be new, the practice has been here. Perhaps not as aptly named, but the practice of the extreme hatred and disrespect of Black women, their voices, and our bodies has been here since the first Black woman landed in this space. Its roots in chattel slavery. You see, the human traffickers, the enslavers had to figure out a way to understand their desire, their sexual desire for Black women. So they could not be women like white women, right? White women, this pedestal that required protection and violence. Black women weren't offered that same protection, but they were desired. So Black women were considered unhuman, like Black men, you know, small brain, bestial. But Black women were objects of desire, so they couldn't call them just Black men. Black women occupied this space where they were not men and they were not white women, but they were oppressed none the same. And you're like, well, they couldn't be Black men. They couldn't be men because of that desire. So there's some homophobia happening too. You shouldn't desire men. But she's an object of desire because she's like a woman. She has those parts. And so Black women occupy this unique kind of third dimension of desired without the protection for women. And so Black women as such, this practice of Misgynoir should be able to create a really strong, solid coalition for Black women, right? On the one hand, you have Black women who have participated fully in the fight for civil rights and human rights. Some light went out. Uh-oh. This is just a comedy of errors today. Okay, this light, let's get that back on. Oh, no, you're not. Are you gonna stay? Oh, not gonna stay on. I like these errors. This is the other part about filming. So I have a second light here I can pull up. Okay. That's not as great as that one, but what you're gonna do. So where was I? So what I call the coalitions, the natural coalitions for Black women, of course, should be Black men. And they have been active participants in civil rights and redress for African Americans, right? Front lines, Fannie Lou Hamer. Oh my gosh, Fannie Lou Hamer always comes to mind because I love Fannie Lou Hamer. Ida B. Wells. Oh my goodness. So many names. Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman. You know, they've always been there in the fight for civil rights and human rights as African Americans. And there's a natural coalition under the Campaign for Justice for Human Rights with all women, with white women. So Black women should be able to bridge these coalitions, but these coalitions are what I call very brittle, because within those coalitions, the other dimension of Black women's oppression gets silenced or ignored. So in civil rights, forces Black women to embody a racial solidarity over her gender. And in the feminist movement, the broad feminist movement, of course, I talk about Black feminism, which is a whole different thing. We're going to get to that. But in feminism, it requires a solidarity with primarily white women. We're not talking about transnational feminists, but in the US context, it requires a solidarity with white women. And sometimes the things that white women want aren't the things that Black women say they want or need. Their priorities might shift, right? And so I say these coalitions are brittle because they both force Black women to choose one or the other oppression as the priority. And therefore, you can't make these movements accountable at things that happen within the wholeness of what it means to be a Black woman. These movements have let us down in that regard. There's a book. I just love the title. It's a what do you call it? It's an anthology. So there's chapters written by different people. And it really encompasses this dilemma that is faced uniquely by Black women. And it's all the women are white, all the Blacks are men, and some of us are brave. All the women are white, all the Blacks are men, but some of us are brave. That in holding on to these interconnected points of oppression by being both Black and woman allows us to, enables us to have a different sense of things, and hold these both movements accountable for our needs. So if I haven't completely let you down and bummed you out, I do have some hopeful thoughts, if you'll just bear with me for a few minutes, because I've really gone over my appointed time. So we have all this, right? And you're like, okay, Keisha, you didn't need to remind me of all this stuff. And now you're saying that my natural coalitions are problematic. I'm not suggesting that you break with these coalitions, but that you hold them accountable. And I tell you, the answer to this is not one single thing. No campaign is, but I have a series of things that I want to stress about. And I call it move like the Combahee. Move like the Combahee. The Combahee is a river outside the Carolinas, South Carolina to be specific. And the Combahee River Raid was one of the largest raids and really was the raid that made the difference in weakening the Confederate side of the Civil War. And the figure that plays most prominently in the Combahee River Raid is not the incomparable Miss Harriet Tubman. She had worked for the Union Army as a spy and as a nurse. And so she was able to go along the communities in that river area, river plantations, and gather intelligence to be able to pass it along for this successful raid. You know, I have a video on how Harriet Tubman is dope. So that's one of the things. We see her in one dimension as, you know, Moses but this is perhaps one of the greatest achievements in the Civil War, and it could be attributed directly to Harriet Tubman. She didn't get her pension, military pension, all that. I can go on. There's a video for that as well. So the Combahee River Raid, and that moment gets commemorated by a group of Black feminists in the summer of the late, maybe 1978, 1979 in Boston. And they call themselves the Combahee River Collective, in name honoring the efforts of Tubman in that successful raid in the Civil War, which resulted in the freeing of about 800 enslaved people. And I tell you that it completely, I hope I didn't use the word cripple. If I did, I did not mean it. But it weakened. That was one of the battles that weakened and made it possible for the Civil War to end. And so these group of women, Black feminists, were working with a large organization of Black women, I think the National Women's Organization, but the Combahee River Collective were these Boston Black women who were lesbians. And they found that they did not sit comfortably in what should have been their natural ally. The National Women's Organization was kind of bound by religious principles in many ways. It came out of the, kind of a church-based movement, and given their stance on homosexuality was a very uncomfortable place, and they were asked to be silent about their issues as Black lesbians. And in the summer, at the same time, in the summer of, I could say late 1970s, Black women were being raped. There was a serial rapist on the ground in Boston, and the police wasn't doing anything wasn't doing really anything to help and to solve this case. So these two things, again, this event, you know, this event that puts Black women and their bodies vulnerable, the lack of attention by those who are supposedly there to, you know, help with crime and safety, and then the quiet disavowal of these women's sexualities had them form the Combahee River Collective. And in that time, in their retreat together, working practically on putting the pressure on the police to find this serial rapist, and on trying to identify themselves as a uniquely positioned group of Black women, they write this statement. It's called the Combahee River Collective Statement. And it is, to me, one of the most inspiring examples of a Black woman's manifesto that I've ever seen. And if you've taken my classes, you probably read it, because that's like the one book you're going to read. You're going to read The Voice, and you're going to read the Combahee River Collective Statement. You're going to do that. And so there's this line, that's why I say move like the Combahee in the sense of moving like Harriet through the space, gathering intelligence, making it a part of the way that you move through the world to create that ease, but move like the Combahee, like the Black women who formed the Combahee River Collective, and create a statement about centering Black women, not as partners with Black men under civil rights, not as co-conspirators with white women under women's rights, but as Black women themselves. And so the line that I think is one of, I will put a link to the Combahee River statement in the description of this video. But I want to read something that, if you want to take away anything, if I bummed you out, I want to read this important statement that comes, this important line that comes from the Combahee River statement. I recommend that you read the whole thing. But they say, if Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free. Since our freedom, Black women, since our freedom necessitates the destruction of all systems of oppression. Let me read that again for you, because this is good. If Black women were free, it would mean that everyone else would have to be free. Since our freedom, Black women's freedom, necessitates the destruction of all systems of oppression. That is so powerful to me. That we can't come at justice only being racial justice. We can't come at justice only being gender justice. We can't do that. The campaign to silence us and to kill us and to have our bodies and consume our bodies and to make us valueless in society needs to stop. And if we are free as Black women, that necessitates that everybody else is. Because our freedom is not just bound in one dimension. If we are free, it necessitates the destruction of all systems of oppression. So, dear Black women, move like the Combahee. And in practice speaking, when I say we only have each other, again, my notes, support Black women, support Black women's businesses, our causes, support my business, the Sojourners Academy. Name Misgynoir, use it. Tell people about it, explain it. The hatred and deep disrespect for Black women as a practice. It is on display repeatedly. And I want you, in dealing with coalitions, don't break the coalitions, but hold them accountable. Patriarchy will not be within our fight for civil rights as Black African Americans. We will hold Black men accountable for all systems of patriarchy and all practices of Misgynoir. And in the women's rights movement, hold white women accountable. Don't even get me started on progressive white women. Ooh, that's another segment too. We ain't gonna talk about that in this one. That's too much. We're gonna get there. But to hold them accountable as well, that it is not a choice. In that famous women's march, I think it was 1908, they made the white suffragettes made the Black suffragettes at the back of the parade. They put us in the back. Okay. That's not holding women's movement accountable. We cannot work with you until we are equal with you and you recognize our multiple dimensions of oppression. And just like Michelle Obama, your joy, practicing joy, resting, traveling, eating good, dressing up, you know how we do. It drives them crazy. Those that practice Misgynoir. Why are we so happy? Why is Michelle living rent-free in that man's brain at that moment? Michelle got things to do. Michelle about to open something up. And he's trying to start a whole crowd swell of she's a man. So keep enjoying, practice joy. Joy is resistance. Joy is self-care. Self-care is resistance. You know all of that stuff. And then finally, move like a Combahee River and find your Combahee Collective. Find your community and collective of Black women, of like-minded Black women who have the commitment to both racial and gender justice, for environmental justice, for economic justice, and understands the principle that if we are free, our freedom necessitates that all are free, because our freedom is tied to the destruction of all systems of oppression. I hope that you think about that. Move like a Combahee. And I guess I should say, as a happy Juneteenth. And thank you for listening. I love us. Bye.